Lord's working in many ways. And we need to look to Him. We need to see things in a different way, maybe than what we have. I remember, and we were talking about this earlier, Jack Moore, Colonel Jack Moore, he was quite a guy. I remember him back in the 80s, and him coming to Phoenix and America's Promise Ministries and preaching a sermon, a tremendous message. And I remember him over the years talking about what happened with the communists. I can't remember right now who the communists were back then. North Korea, that's what I thought. And he was a POW, and he thought when they were shooting at him, it was the end. But a guy was actually saving his life, and he promised the Lord that if you'll get me out of this, I'll serve you the rest of my life, and he did. But when he was in Phoenix, I have to kind of laugh about this. Pastor Emery reminded Colonel Moore of the letter that he had written long ago. Well, actually, it wasn't that long ago. In the early 80s, against the Israel truth and against the Israel message. And he wrote Pastor Emery on that. Pastor Emery went and looked that up, pulled it out, and said, "Do you remember writing this a long time ago when you were in the John Birch Society?" And of course, Pastor Emery was in that society at one time himself, I think. And Colonel Moore says, "Oh, you would have to bring that up." But he was against, at that time, the Israel truth, the Israel message. And when he really studied it out, our history, our heritage, the Bible and all that, he came to realize the blessing of who we are and how God's working His people. You know, yesterday, this message at the end, the minister gave was so convoluted, so strange. I don't even know where the guy was coming from. But there were a lot of people there. It must have been over hundreds of them. And I thought, gosh, if I even had 1% of the people at my funeral, I'd be lucky, I guess. I'm sure many of you feel the same way. But we really do not need, for many of us, funerals. We may have them, but we're going to the Lord. It's a resurrection we look forward to. And after we are dead, we know nothing. We're in the Lord's hands. And He does with us as He wills. But I had this man come up and give me a hug yesterday as though he knew me. I don't know who he was, but I told him next week I'll be speaking a little bit at the funeral. Kevin will be giving the main service. I'll probably talk for a few minutes. You know, another man, I know I'm just talking off the top of my head. Y'all don't mind that, do you? I knew you wouldn't. Another man I really loved and I was very close to was Howard Freeman. How many of you remember Howard Freeman way back years ago? He was a very close friend of mine. Like Ray Caft, I dearly remember him and often think about him. Howard Freeman was another one of those. He was an engineer who used to give talks during the lunch break. He built bridges in Idaho and Montana and different places. And he used to talk to them on various economic issues. And he would fight the government based on his knowledge of various things. And I remember years ago, went to various courtrooms and fought the government on various issues on different levels. And I wonder where that knowledge is today. I don't hear anybody talking about that. And I know there are various positions we could have, from the Bible to the Constitution and other things. But I remember him coming here often in North Idaho. He loved to eat. And he always told me, Dave, when I go to eat, I'm going to dine. And boy, he would dine. He would enjoy himself. And I loved to talk to the man. I loved to pick his brain. And he would love it and talk to me on various levels about different things. I had pretty much, and I know he did, an insatiable desire to learn. Well, I hope you have that desire as well. I hope you're open-minded to God's Word. And one thing I appreciate about Pastor Kevin Reed is he is also open-minded. He is also a studier and a thinker at various levels with God's Word. And so here we are. We're not here just to be blessed. Yes, we are. But we're here to learn. We may not learn what we want to, but we're going to learn. And that learning helps us grow. So we need to look at it on a different level. Amen? So y'all enjoy this sermon. Enjoy this word that we're going to hear from Pastor Reed, because it's going to help you. It's going to mold you. It'll definitely, I believe, sustain us. A lot of work goes into these messages by various people. I know it does with Pastor Reed and others. It takes a lot to do a message. You don't just come and give a message. It takes time, it takes study, it takes prayer. So I'm going to turn over to Pastor Reed at this time. God bless you as you enjoy this message as I will. Amen.
Okay, good morning. This morning we're going to do, what does the Bible say about retirement? Does kingdom service have an expiration date? We'll cover these real quick, and this will roll right into everything we've been preaching about since October, of course. So, should we stop working if we're healthy and able to work? Does the Bible have anything to say practically about work and retirement? And it seems that when I researched retirement, it seems to be a relatively new idea. It seems to have come around sometime in the 1950s. At least that's where I could start to pin it down with the history of employment and, unionization and things like that. So it seems to be a 1950s and up concept. So it's a cultural concept then. The Bible has nothing to say about retirement. There's nothing in there about retirement. Because of this, people have asked, well, what is it? Is retirement biblical? And because the Bible doesn't have anything to say about it, you see, people will then make the Bible an outdated document. And since it doesn't have anything to say about what we have today as far as in terms of retirement, then that's another reason to just go ahead and put the Bible away, because after all, it applied to some nomadic desert peoples of ancient days, long past, who wandered around with sandals and flip-flops and tents and deserts and stuff. But we know better. We know that the Bible tells us what to do in all aspects of our life, so we'll take a look at that. Just because the Bible predates our society doesn't mean that it doesn't have anything to say that we can apply to today. And that's our job as kingdom believers. That's how we learn and grow. And you'll see, and that's being taught from not just churches today, but schools, universities, everything that they do to make the Bible seem like it doesn't have any need in our lives. And that's, even Christians are starting to see that the Bible's being taught from the pulpits as something that cannot be applied to us today, because something like retirement. I've been asked, well, what does it say? Well, it doesn't have anything to say about it, but that doesn't mean it can't be a light unto us. So Genesis 3, we'll just turn very quickly to Genesis 3, and we'll see, we'll start with work. We'll see what the Bible has to say about work, and we'll see if we can see anything about retirement from that work. Genesis 3, look at verse 17. And unto Adam he said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, thou shalt not eat of it, cursed is the ground for thy sake, and the sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Thorns and also thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field, and the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return to the ground, for out of it wast thou taken, for dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return. So see, now here, it seems to say that people will say, well then, because Adam has to work then is a curse put on us because of the fall. But according to the story in Genesis here, both Adam and Eve were cursed for their disobedience. And as a result, we are under that curse. And remember last week's sermon, we did touch on the fact that the wages of sin is death, and therefore all who have died are guilty of sin, and all who sin must die. So that is the law of sin and death. And like we said last week, Jesus' work ensured that we don't stay in the ground. And Paul stated that we're free from that law, the law of sin and death that mandates that we would stay in the grave forever. So sin was made unto Adam and Eve a source of sorrow and trouble, and we can see the curse was the resulting consequence of that sin. Yet Eve, she's given the curse, but now we can see Eve, her joy, as in all women, her delight is the protection, care, and lordship from and to her husband, and second to her children, her work. So you see, Adam is her head now, and then her joys is the raising of children. And of course, we'll see that she has other jobs as well. And Adam's calling is then to work. And that is Adam's joy and his privilege, and we'll see how that plays out. Look at Genesis 2:15. And the Lord took the man and put him in the garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. So the word dress here in Genesis could mean till or cultivate. And the word keep here is to care for and to guard. So keep that word guard in mind. We'll touch on that later. So Adam's job has many aspects then. First, he was to subjugate and develop earth. And this is the dominion work of Adam, man. And this work includes manual labor, agriculture, and science. We as God's children and his creation then cannot exist apart from God. Therefore, the work given to us and expected of us is dominion work unto God in every aspect of our lives. And this is going to be very important as we move along in these sermons this year. We're going to start to understand our dominion work as men and women in the kingdom is all about reconstruction then, from the bottom up, just as Adam and Eve's priority one was when they left Eden to reconstruct the kingdom, even though we're under the curse and we'll return to the dust. So, we cannot use the earth then apart from God's law. His law spells out the way in which he expects us to conduct ourselves, and we are to be wise stewards of his earth. And if you read the laws, for example, we're not to be thieves or murderers. Now, in addition to work, Adam was, according to 2:19, also given the job to name and classify animals. Now, remember my sermon on clean and unclean animals. We did go over that much of the system of binomial nomenclatures that we have now, which we use to classify animals, the binomial nomenclatures, the two words in Latin, that was by the scientist Carl Linnaeus. And if you look them up, you'll come to know that he did indeed have a moon crater named after him. And as you go through the scientists of the 16th, 17th, and 18th century, you'll start to notice that commonly they seem to be of Jacob's sons. So even Adam's work here, all the way back in Genesis 2, that started with the animal classification, his progeny has carried that on. And our classification system that we use is still in use today by Adam. Now, Adam continues in this divine work, as we do. And one thing, like I said, when we study God's green earth and his creatures, it's easy for us to see God's creative orders and our relationship and God's plan and our relationship to God's other creations, man and beast and everything else. We were talking about that this morning, about how the theory of evolution has no biblical grounds because it is all under God's control and in his law and order. And as we study things, more and more has come to light that there is no randomness in what this universe has and what we see every day. So, if you read Genesis, you go ahead and read about Adam, you'll find out two things about his work. These are very interesting points. Adam's work was imparted to him before the fall. Okay, so this must mean that work is a part of this age and a part of the perfected kingdom age. Now that's startling because, and I'll prove that now, if you go to Revelation 22, we'll see that the work does not end, and it didn't just begin because of sin, and it doesn't end with our death because of that sin. Revelation 22, look at verse 1. And he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of God and of the Lamb. In the midst of the street of it, on either side of the river, was there a tree of life which bare 12 manner of fruits, and yielded her fruit every month, and the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. Verse 3, and there shall be no more curse, but the throne of God and of the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him. Now, here is a composite right here in just these three verses of the end time prophecy you can read all about in Isaiah, Jeremiah, Micah, and Malachi. If you look here, he showed me a river, the throne of God and the land, midst of the street. Okay, so we're talking about a city. If you want to know what city, look over there at 21:14. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and in them the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. So this is obviously end time prophecy concerning the new Jerusalem. And in this New Jerusalem I see happen to be 12 trees 12 manner of fruits that are yielded every month. So there will be people living in this city who seem to be of a 12, which is God's number, his children, and they're producing 24/7 or year-round for the service in the kingdom. And here, the leaves were for the healing of the nations. Now, if you go back to other prophecies, we'll see that the nation of God's planting is Israel. And here, what we work for, the servants who will be there in the kingdom, seem to be healing the nations. Now, that's an odd thing if it's only Israel in the kingdom age, because Israel's not going to be healing herself. Israel's going to be seen doing what? Well, you read about Isaiah 51. The other nations will come to us, because out of the nation or out of this city comes forth the law. So there we go again. The kingdom revolves around work and the law, always. So the bearing of fruit continues on, as does the work. And the work is what? What work are we talking about? Dominion work, the progression of the kingdom, the healing of the nations, so that the kingdom does spread throughout the whole earth. More prophecy supporting what the kingdom age will be like. So, the kingdom age must include work for two reasons. Number one, it was the original order, as we've seen. Adam was given a job before the fall, and that is worship. And we'll touch more on what that actual work looks like in this age later. So Adam's work was given to him before the fall and before Eve, before marriage. You see? So that fits what Paul wrote to Timothy in 1 Timothy 3, because before the appointment to a public office or presbyter or head of church would be strictly men, but one must have proven himself both in work and in marriage. Remember, that's what Paul said about the presbyters and head of church. Now, that seems to fit what Deborah had as well, because we know she was married. And, so if you have to have proven yourself in work and in marriage, then Deborah, of course, fits the bill as well as being someone who was selected for public office. Now, concerning Deborah, and I always get this thrown at me very recently, I guess people are starting to finally catch up on the sermons, and they've said, "Hey, Reed, what about Deborah?" Well, they want to argue about Deborah having a job, because they say, well, Deborah shouldn't have a job because she was forsaking her children or her family or anything. Well, the Bible doesn't say she has any children, nor does the Bible say that she had children and they were raised up so she was free to go have a job then, you see. So people try to argue a point that isn't made by the Bible at all. The Bible doesn't say anything negative about her work. It actually points towards a positive things. You see, Deborah made positive gains for the kingdom, and people want to present her then as neglecting her family or even the children she may or may not have. Of course, the Bible has no veracity about that. But if we don't add or subtract anything from the scriptures concerning Deborah, we see that she was indeed married, and her work is proven as a matter of Bible history. It's recorded. So I would say that Deborah has proven herself in what she did, and she was married. So that fits. Deborah was right to work. There's nothing wrong with that at all. So we're to work, and by we, I mean Adam and Eve. Now remember, Eve was given a job description that certainly involves a great amount of dominion work as well. Now, she doesn't have babies, and then just retires when they turn 18 or 21 or whatever it is the age of accountability is. You see? So we are to work, but what does Jesus say about it? How long are we to keep working? So let's go to, I'll go to John. I'll just read these very quickly for you. Let's see what Jesus had to say about work, and then we'll get on with what retirement is. So according to John 9:4, I read what Jesus said. I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day, the night cometh, when no man can work. And then in John 5, verse 14, I read, afterward Jesus findeth him in the temple. 5:17. But Jesus answered them, my Father worketh hitherto, and I work. So as Christians then, if we're to be Christ-like, We are to imitate Christ and be his ambassadors, correct? That means then we're to continue working as God is said to be. And as long as we have daylight, we should be seen carrying out the work of the one that sent us, if we're to be Christ-like. And Jesus also says that when we seek or strive for the kingdom, the things we need will be provided to us by him. And he tells us not to worry about it, right? Now, the world system, that would be the city of Babylon, has always been in opposition to Christ's kingdom. Now, the system is obviously a subversion to God's order because it says that after such and so time, you quit work, you retire, and then I'll take care of you. I'll be your provider. So the concept of the retirement is an extra biblical matter. And of course, it's another plank for Nebuchadnezzar to replace God in your life. You see, so here we go. Now, according to Revelation, Mystery Babylon cares very little for men's souls and lives. And we're being conditioned to think that way. And you see, when you think about how the elderly are treated in this nation, and those that aren't healthy enough for physical labor, they're tossed away. They're useless. That's the way of it now. Now, you have Canada, who has the MAID program. You guys heard of the MAID program? The MAID program is Medical Assistance in Dying. That's the acronym, which is Physician-Assisted Suicide. That's what it is. Now, when I was in college, we had to do ethics papers, and mine was on physician-assisted suicide. And back then, a physician-assisted suicide seemed like a long, long way off. It was almost a theory, but we had heard about it, so we were discussing the ethics of it. But now I see it is a reality, and Canada is passing laws for it. Medical Assistance in Dying, which is a fancy physician-assisted suicide. The difference is you're the one that gives yourself the injection, not the doctor. That's it. That's the only difference. So if someone else, and here this would be the state, says that you don't have the mental capacity to work, or your body has physical limitations, you shouldn't work, you are no good to us, you should just hurry up and die because you have no place here among us, and we'll help you do that. That's what the MAID program is, and it does apply to mental capacities and physical limitations, the elderly. Now, work is a commandment from God, and he's ordained that to us. Because we're God's creations and he's purposed us to work, then his work gives us purpose. He also commands us to rest, and that's also within God's purposes. It reminds us to not only work unto him, but to rest unto him as well. You see, God's law has all aspects of our lives covered. It's very important we know that. So commandment number 4 then, which is the law of Sabbath, is equally a work command as well as a rest commandment. That's the pattern God set, which is what? A 1 and 7 or a 49 and 50. Now, if we're to emulate God, as he tells us to do, then we rest one day after 6 days of labor. So if you don't work, but you rest, then you're actually just 1/7 of the way of keeping that commandment. Now, God rested on the 7th day. He didn't retire. Notice. That Monday he got back to work. Also, notice the absence of calendar dates here in Genesis 1 and 2. I'd like you to notice that. So if you could work 6 days and rest 1. The reason I say that is because if you work Monday through Sunday, rest Monday. That'll be your labor, that'll be your Sabbath. If you work Wednesday to Tuesday, your Sabbath is Wednesday. So the absence of calendar dates, just 1 and 7. 1 and 7. You work your 6, you rest on that next 7th. There doesn't need to be a Sunday, Saturday thing. We just happen to have church on Sunday. So now Deuteronomy 28, 11 and 12. And the Lord shall make thee plenteous in goods, and fruit of thy body, and the fruit of thy cattle, and the fruit of thy ground, and the land which the Lord sware unto thy fathers to give thee. The Lord shall open unto thee his good treasure, and heaven, and give you rain unto thy land in its season, and to bless all the work of thine hand, and thou shalt lend unto many nations, and thou shalt not borrow. That word treasure there could be translated storehouses, and that should remind you what he's supposed to open up in Malachi to us. So, material blessings, it seems here, are predicated on, according to verse 12, the work of thine hand. But what about intangibles? Go to Proverbs 16:3. Commit thy works unto the Lord, and thy thoughts shall be established. So here, wisdom and knowledge seem to be the fruits of one's labors, rendered unto God as well. Now, Solomon, of course, all of his proverbs reflected the law. And if you really think about how wise Solomon was, one of the greatest examples of his wisdom is given what? When he makes rulings on God's law. Remember the two women fighting over the kid? Right? That's what's interesting about Solomon. In all his wisdom, one of the things that exemplifies his wisdom is his knowledge of the law. Of course, he said, well, the knowledge of the law, what you want to glean out of this Bible, it is work. And that's the blessing of it. So, retirement then. It's a system of Babylon, not God. If we work, the state now has us work. If it were up to the state, and you see this now, if you will work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That's the way Babylon wants it. But because God's law and order concerns a work-rest cycle, because that work-rest cycle is forsaken, in lieu of what Babylon says, people's bodies start to break down. And then what do you know? After years of doing it their way, their system of retirement doesn't sound so bad anymore, does it? And you hear about these people wanting to go and retire and things like that. Well, if you had the work-rest cycles that God set up to begin with, you wouldn't break down by the time you're 50 or 60. You see, God set this up. He knows our bodies. He knows what we need. So why are we here then? What are we supposed to be seen doing? Well, we serve God. How? Well, keep his commandments and, of course, teach others to do so. Now, why do we do that? Why do we keep his commandments and teach others? To establish his kingdom and to be overcomers, and according to verses in Revelation, to heal the nations. To obey and worship God always in all aspects of our lives while there is daylight here is what we're commanded to do, because we are kings and priests then, right? Now, according to Numbers 8, there is going to be some dates that God does set according to work. Go to Numbers 8, and this is very interesting. Numbers 8, look at verse 23. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, This is that belongeth unto the Levites, from 20 and 5 years old and upwards. They shall go in to wait upon the service of the tabernacle of the congregation. And from the age of 50 years they shall cease waiting upon the service thereof, and shall serve no more, but shall minister with their brethren in the tabernacle of the congregation, to keep the charge, and do no service. Thou shalt do unto the Levites touching their charge. So from 25 to 50 years, they performed duty in the Lord's service. You see, the Levite service was almost like a military service. You did what you did, and then after 50, you left. And they did a whole lot of things. Remember, these priests, it wasn't just sacraments or anything like that at the altar. They were public officials, guards, lawyers. They did services in the tent of meeting as well. Now at 50, they withdrew from service, it says. But they did not stop working. So what did they do then? Well, according to 26, to keep the charge, so they kept guard. Now remember that word guard, to keep. They kept guard, as in they oversaw the services now being done by their younger replacements. You see, the duties never ceased, and neither does the work. It's a perpetual work as it's done. So it doesn't stop. The elderly, here 50 and up, continue their work, but the type of work has changed then, so they're still working, just in a different capacity. Now this is the biblical pattern. Remember the word to Adam in the garden, to keep, or care for, or guard. Guard, but do no service. They are aged, yet they're expected to remain working by overseeing and guiding those who take their place. So in reality, we do age then. Therefore, after a certain amount of years and after a certain point, there are things that we simply cannot do anymore like we used to. So there's nothing to be ashamed of. And while doing kingdom work, according to Solomon again, when you have gray hairs, you've earned those as a symbol, as a glory of your years of service. That's the glory of the silver crown. Now, we should not hide the fact then that we're older. We should instead embrace it and celebrate that. Now, I'm just the young guy, and I know I'm probably preaching to the choir. But I understand it because I understand this is the order of things. And the reason why I've come to respect this is because of this. God has put us here, and He's put us here for a purpose. Now, He could remove us at any point. So He must have something for us to do still while there's daylight, so let's get on that. A perfect example of Leviticus 8 then, is in today's age, is exactly what we have here with my friend Pastor Barley. Both him and I have had long discussions over coffee about this ministry. And I told him a long time ago, I'm not seasoned. I don't have the gray hairs. But I can do the heavy lifting. I can do whatever it is you need me to do. But I need your guidance and wisdom at all times. He is my head. Therefore, I answer to Him and do whatever He asks and whatever He requires. There's no doubt that He's here every day with me working as hard as I do. No doubt in my mind about that. Now, He doesn't stand here and preach for an entire hour like He used to every Sunday morning. But He's done that for as long as I've been on this earth. So I'd say He's earned the ability to sit and enjoy a service or two without actually having to give one, right? Martha and him both are my counselors, and their terms of service and all of their work unto God are passed on to me as a means of kingdom wisdom and knowledge. That's the crown of glory they have. That's the crown of glory all of you have. It's truly wondrous, then, if you think about how God has placed my family here with your families and how it all has worked together. Because that's the work of God in the kingdom, you see. He brought in a younger person, but He's let remain the older, wiser wealths of knowledge that He knew I needed and left them in place here. And I'm to support them, and they give back to me by answering all the kingdom questions that I asked them. So I thank you, Dave. That's it. I thank you for that. And that's a biblical concept. It's exactly here. And I didn't even realize that until I studied that this week. Without even knowing it, I had already been set up for the Levitical laws as in the priesthood. So, obviously then, it's not a biblical concept to put people out to pasture. You see? Our calling on our God, then, is not solely tied to your current job description either. Worship, or keeping and guarding the Word of God in all aspects of your life, happens in spite of your age, in spite of your current position, and it can happen in spite of your gender. That's why I thank Martha as well. Every day, she's just as much a counselor to me as Dave. Now, another example of that would be like, think of a surgeon. If he gets up in age and his hands shake and his eyes aren't what they used to be, the wisdom and experience that that man has over the long term of service he's had in the ER isn't wasted if he doesn't go and sit down and be quiet in the corner or hospice care, but yet teaches others. See, that's the system. We transition over to a different work in our lives while still using God's gifts and skills to glorify Him and His kingdom. When we refrain from doing that by dropping out, we miss out on what God has appointed for us. God's dominion work gives us purpose. God's word never encourages us to hate work. You'll know your work is filled with purpose when it aligns with the kingdom of God. Now, how do you know such a thing then? Well, I suggest reading the Bible and gleaning its instructions. And after reading this Bible, you should have an accurate job description. And then, of course, pray to God, and His assurance on the matter is always going to be your second witness. There's even a parable that Jesus gave us to say that God assigns different work to different servants. You see, this is a concept found throughout the Scriptures as well, and the Gospels, because if you think about the varying disciples and apostles and how different their walks of life and what their experiences must have been, and yet God used all of them together. And that's very important. So we're to work honestly and responsibly, or in other words, what am I saying here? I'm talking about being gainfully employed as kingdom ambassadors. That's what I want to see, and that's what I think God has commanded us to be. We are then to be tasked, just as Adam and Eve were, to progress the kingdom on earth. Working for God is commanded to us, and it's also a means of giving our lives back to Him. God made us to be community-oriented. Therefore, it's important that we are actually a community of covenant members. As a community, then, we are to interact, patiently instruct or teach, and gather, just as Jesus commanded us to do, correct? Covenant members are Christian Israel. God does not intend for us as believers to be isolated. Now, you remember the Rona and its mandates, the Great Reset, right? Now, that's not a conspiracy anymore. It was used by the beast system. And in this case, the beast system, which another name for that would be the World Economic Forum. That is the beast system. That's the name of it. So what did they do with this great reset? What did they use the COVID-19 to do? Well, they stopped people from gathering with others and instead forced us to retire to our homes and be isolated. You see another subversion to God's kingdom community orientation that He gave us. So, and we know the negative outcomes across millions of people that this had, the effects it did. It hurt us all. And we know these things now. It's all come out. It's also well known that when people stop working or stop having a purpose or stop interacting, they don't live very long. Why? Well, it's out of order. Again, another anti-kingdom system made to undermine God and man's relationship to Him. So life that has no purpose is a life that's soon over. See? So it is a matter of life and death. A life living as God intended extends to us benefits, both material and immaterial. Remember, He promised us the fruit of the earth, and He promised He'd order our thoughts, which goes right along with being what? Well, fulfilled, being happy. It provides riches. That would be the kingdom age. If you think about riches now, and of course kingdom age riches is what? Well, our positions as overcomers in the kingdom and officers. You can read all about that in the prophets and Revelation. They both correlate that what we do here on earth has something to do with the position we'll be in the kingdom age. So as you can see how much of a tragic loss it is to both the community and to the person themselves to be told that they cannot work or that they shouldn't be working, even after they've understood it to be a command from God that's accompanied by blessings. It's actually upsetting then to see people who actually work or who actually are willing to work and who would gain joy and fulfillment from it being told they shouldn't do so, and then they doubt if it's the right thing to do. I say ignore the people who tell you should not be working in the kingdom age now, and what work is, what it isn't. Work is worship in all aspects of our lives. So ignore those people that tell you shouldn't work. They tell you to don't abandon the kingdom, and don't abandon your drive to work either. Don't get caught up in word games or house rules like we've said this year. God gave us his word, and it will guide you, and he would never call you to break his law or his order. He's infallible. Man is not. Therefore, you take your assignment and you do it with all your heart in your corner of the kingdom. Don't let what others say impede you or your tasks. Those who impede you of your duty actually hate your work. And most of the time when people say, and this is what people want to ask me, Reed, what can I do for the kingdom? I want to be seen working, but I'm told I can't do this or that, and I can't do this, I can't be seeing that. Well, what I'm saying is, the reason why people try to stop you from doing your kingdom work, usually, most often, their modus operandi, their MO is to make themselves feel better. And we've all seen this in our job, because when you are doing your work wholeheartedly and diligently, you make them look bad. And we've all seen this in our daily jobs, correct? Like, hey, don't work so hard. You're making the rest of us look bad. You know? And I'm like, well, I'm just doing what I was told. That's all. Nothing more nor less than that. But the ones that want to put a stop to that are usually the ones that aren't the working ones. Now, in the military, we call those guys sandbaggers. And they're thieves and liars. But don't hinder someone else's work, because that work that they're doing came from higher command. That's where it came from. So maintain your work so that your light will shine. Don't hide it. Don't be ashamed of it. Mind your own business and don't worry about others and their work. You keep focused on your task, and if others get bent out of shape about what you do, well, let them be unrighteous still. While there is still daylight, you seize every opportunity to work in God's kingdom. Now, I'm going to recruit, because there are people out there that don't have a home or a place to work. So I'm going to recruit right now. If you are a covenant member, that's a Christian Israelite from the house of Jacob, and you've been discriminated against and denied work, yet you've signed up and you actually wish to work, I want you. We have a place for you here, America's Promise. You don't have to reside here physically to be a worker. You can call us. You can email us. As a matter of fact, I had a person call me and say, Pastor Reed, I know I'm not a pastor, I know I'm not an evangelist or anything, but I've written up a work, I've written up a missive that I'd like to see in the newsletter. Then I said, well, I haven't had time to investigate such subject matter yet, but if you've already done the work, send it to us, we'll look at it, and I'd be more than happy to add it to the nation's newsletter. Why would I hinder his light? Why do I want to stop that work? Those are the people I'm looking for, the willing and able workers of the kingdom. So why limit the light? The kingdom's huge, and the workload equally so. Kingdom work has no expiration date, and it has no start date either. The start date's now. There are positions available, and you can be a trainee, a laborer, and if those along in years, a trainer, just like we have in this age. You can be an instructor trainer. No discrimination here. However, Bible law is enforced now, so don't think just because you thought you heard you could be a pastor, there were going to be some red tape. And of course, you guys know this, but females cannot be head of church. That's not my rule, that's God's. So Christian Israelites don't discriminate other Christian Israelites like Mystery Babylon does to others, do we? Oh? Well, now what did I say the state said? The state says if you're physically weak, you should not or cannot work. Remember? Well, kingdom teachers say if you're a weaker vessel, you shouldn't be seen working. Careful. The state says a mental capacity that's less than what others are considered to have, you don't have a job, you're no good to us. I've heard kingdom teachers say, well, Eve isn't as smart as Adam. She doesn't have the mentality as Adam. She can't judge as well as Adam. Therefore, she can't be seen working. Remember? October. The state says age mandates when you can and cannot work. Now, kingdom teachers, they said, well, you have to be an old maid or a widow or have had at least one child and have them raised up in so many years, then we have a job for you. Then we have something you could be seen doing. And what a ridiculously long list of years to wait around to start working for the kingdom, right? That's what I have them said. That's what they told me. You have to be a widow, have gray hair, or have raised up all these children before you can be seen as anything valuable in the workforce here and now. It's an awful long, long way to put off your start date, if you make it that far. The state says community is not paramount. Therefore, there is no place for you to be. There's no place for you to interact. You stay home. You stay isolated. You have no purpose. That's what the state says. Kingdom teachers say you have nothing to offer in public houses of worship. You have nothing to offer outside of your home. Sure, you have a job to do. Sure, ladies, you have a light to shine. But we're not going to have that outside of your house or the four walls. Unless you want to be shamed into silence, you keep it there. Now, I thought we didn't hurt our own. People would say that certain people who and should be seen working and who can and can't work, they're not kingdom-oriented when they say that. They're actually more state-oriented, if I just say it. If I said, this is their arguments from months and months ago, and you had to bring it up again. This keeping these people out of the workplace is discrimination, just as the state does. And of course, the state is who? Well, that's Mystery Babylon. So from what we've studied this morning then, the nation of Israel should be what then? Community-focused, or working together to glorify the King, His order, and the teamwork we need has to be done in order to progress the kingdom on earth. Adam and Eve were given the job to reconstruct the kingdom after the fall, to be dominion Christians. And since it's Adam and Eve, I would say that job requires teamwork. A biblical society, then, is a community of covenant members who offer insights and effort to usher in God's kingdom while doing what He commanded. Even though our ages, our abilities, and our genders vary, our orders remain the same. Because I don't find any discrimination about who and what kind of work we should be seen doing, I don't and won't preach that. Because that helps Mystery Babylon. And it does violence to God's kingdom. And as you follow that train of thought, you'll eventually get down to where it's deception. That's what it is. Preaching something the Bible doesn't say. Now, what am I saying? Well, I'll end with this. Ecclesiastes 12:13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. So you do your work. God will decide what it is. But what is our work to be? Well, obey God, keep His commandments. Don't be ashamed in abandoning God, because that's the path of death. You're valued here. Don't fall prey then to pastor-assisted suicide. That's all I have for today.